So let's talk about reduce in JavaScript. The reduce method executes a reducer function that you provide on each member of the array, resulting in a single output value. So what does this mean exactly? Well, let's say that you have an array, and this array is a cart for a store that you're creating. Let's say you're selling games. So let's create that cart for the user. First, we'll need to create an array. So in this cart, we're going to have a few objects, and the objects are going to be modeled after the game. So when you're purchasing a game, you're going to need to have some data, and what this data is going to consist of is the game's name, the price of the game, and because it is a cart, we're going to have the quantity. The quantity represents how many of these games the user is purchasing. Now we're going to add a few more objects into this cart. Okay, so now we have our cart, and our cart is populated by several objects representing the games that the user wants to purchase. Now we want to know what is the price of all of these games that the user has in their cart. In order to find the total price of the user's cart, we would have to find the sum of the price times quantity of each object inside of the cart. So this would be 60 times 3 plus 20 times 6 plus 400 plus 15 plus 60. In total, the user would have spent $775 for all of the items which are in their cart. Now let's do this through code. First, we're going to show an example of how to do this without reduce, and then we're going to do the exact same thing with reduce. This will demonstrate how reduce can extensively shorten your code. First, we're going to create a function called calculate total price. What this function will do is find the total price of every item inside of the user's cart by multiplying the price times the quantity of each object. We have to pass the cart into the function in order for it to recognize what it is looping through and what it is calculating the total price of. Now we're going to set the total price by default to 0, because if there's nothing to loop through, then the total price of every item in the cart, which there are no items, will be 0 by default. Now we will iterate through every cart item. Iteration is basically, first we're going to fetch the first item in the cart and do something with it. Then we're going to fetch the second item in the cart and do something with it. Then we're going to fetch the third, and so forth. In our case, every single time we fetch one of the items in the cart and move on to the next, we are going to add price times the quantity into the total price. As you can see, every time we iterate through the cart, we are updating the total price by price times quantity of the current object. Now we're going to return the total price of the cart. Once that's done, we're going to print out a log telling us what the total price of the cart is. We do this through console.log, calculate total price, and then we pass through our array. Now let's see what the results are. Here I've created a simple HTML template that fetches our reduce file in order for it to execute in the browser. As you can see, the total price displays in our console. Now let's perform the same example, but using reduce. In order to use reduce, we're going to need to memorize two things: our accumulator and our current value. First, let's get our array, which we know is called cart. Now let's call reduce. Now we're going to create a function that contains two parameters, accumulator and current value. This function will later be shortened. At the moment, we're going to do it the long way in order to properly explain how reduce works. The 0 at the end represents where we want our accumulator to begin. In our case, the total price will begin with 0. This can be left empty, but by default, reduce uses the first member of our array, which is an object. We do not want to add objects together. We only want to add the numbers in the objects together, which are the quantity and the price. So we will set our accumulator to 0 by default, aka our total price. In our case, the current value is our game or video game, because every time that we iterate through our array, we get back the video game that is within our cart. So in this example, we can change the parameter's name, current value, to just game. That way it is easier for us to understand what the code does. In order to understand what the code does even more, we can change accumulator to just total price. Because in essence, what we're returning is the total price of every game inside of our array. So every time we iterate through our array, we're going to update our total price by the object or game's price times quantity. Now we can even shorten this code more by using ES6 syntax. Now let's console.log this new method of fetching the total price. If we refresh the page, we should see old 775 and new 775. Old 775 represents our old method of calculating the price, and new 775 represents our new method of calculating the total price through using reduce. It seems we forgot to add game.quantity to our code. It shouldn't just be quantity, it should be game.quantity, because game represents our object. We don't have any variable called quantity. However, we do have our object, and in this object, we have a quantity. As you can see, we get the same total price, whether that be using our own custom function on calculating the total price or through using reduce. However, reduce only took us one line of code, while calculate total price took several. Thank you for watching this video, and if you enjoyed the content, be sure to subscribe.